If you place a common earthworm next to its marine cousin, at first glance, the only difference seems to be their habitat. On land, the worst fate a worm can suffer is drying out on a scorching sidewalk or becoming a quick snack for a hungry bird. Their lives are quiet, humble, and full of dangers they are completely defenseless against. But the moment we dive into the depths of the ocean, the rules of the game radically change. In the water, worms cease to be victims. They transform into ruthless, bloodthirsty predators. They grow powerful jaws, hunt large fish, and reach lengths of over 10 feet. They possess such immense strength that a concrete sidewalk would feel like a minor inconvenience. Biologically, both are classified as true annelid worms, yet they occupy completely opposite ecological niches. Why did nature allow these marine worms to become absolute monsters? And what could they possibly be defending themselves against in the abyss of the ocean? The most striking and terrifying example of a predatory marine worm is Eunice aphrodite, better known as the bobbit worm. Through evolution, this creature has transformed into a literal bear trap, only designed for fish. Bobbit worms can grow to a colossal length of up to 10 feet. However, in the wild, you will rarely see them in all their glory. They prefer to bury 95% of their long, segmented bodies deep within the ocean floor. Only 5 highly sensitive antennae remain on the surface, functioning as high-precision motion sensors. If a wandering fish, like a massive pufferfish, brushes against one of these antennae, its fate is sealed. The worm's strike is lightning fast. It grabs the prey with powerful jaws and drags it underground with incredible force, leaving absolutely no chance for escape. The most surprising part is that this ruthless hunter is practically blind. It lacks fully developed eyes, possessing only primitive light-sensitive organs. It attacks blindly at anything that swims past its burrow. If the prey is too large to drag down whole, the bobbit worm simply bites off a massive chunk. This begs a logical question. Pufferfish are lethally poisonous, so why doesn't the worm die from its toxins? Scientists believe that during such a lightning-fast attack, the fish simply doesn't have time to release enough venom, or perhaps the worm instinctively avoids eating the most toxic organs. These creatures are notorious for their phenomenal camouflage skills. There are frequent cases where bobbit worms have accidentally ended up in home marine aquariums, hitchhiking inside live coral rocks. Aquarium owners would spend weeks unable to understand why their expensive exotic fish were disappearing without a trace at night, or turning up chopped in half, until one day they noticed a massive monster retreating rapidly into the gravel when the lights turned on. A bobbit worm can live in your aquarium for years, remaining completely undetected. To understand why the evolutionary paths of terrestrial and marine worms diverged so drastically, we must look to the laws of physics and ecology. On land, earthworms act as decomposers, nature's recyclers. They slowly consume rotting leaves in the soil, completely avoiding competition with large predators. Their main survival strategy isn't strength, it's sheer numbers. There are simply so many of them that predators physically cannot eat them all. Life on a coral reef dictates entirely different conditions. The reef is a brutal, densely populated, and highly competitive environment where every neighbor is armed with a hard shell, venomous spines, or razor-sharp claws. A common soft-bodied worm wouldn't survive a single day here. In the ocean, decaying organic matter is extremely nutrient-poor, but catching a single live fish is equivalent to millions of servings of rotting leaves. To hunt such large, aggressive prey, marine worms had to become larger, stronger, and far more deadly. But the single most important factor that allowed them to reach such gigantic sizes was gravity. If an earthworm tried to grow to 10 feet long on land, it would simply turn into an immobile, flabby mass. It has no skeleton, and under the crushing force of gravity, its body would flatten under its own weight. In the ocean, however, the water supports the animal's body. This buoyancy allows marine worms to build immense muscle mass, thick armor, and heavy jaws without the fear of collapsing under their own sheer weight.
However, brute force and gigantic size are not the only evolutionary paths in the ocean. Some worms took a different route, relying entirely on chemical warfare. Meet the bearded fireworm. Unlike the bobbit worm, this little guy actually looks quite appealing. It's small, brightly colored, and lined with fluffy white tufts along its sides, making it look like an exotic marine caterpillar or a fuzzy toy. Inexperienced divers often feel an overwhelming urge to reach out and touch this marvel of nature, and that is the biggest mistake you could possibly make. These harmless-looking white hairs are actually thousands of hollow, glass-like needles filled to the brim with a powerful neurotoxin. If you so much as brush against the worm, these fragile needles instantly snap off, embedding themselves into your skin and injecting venom directly into your nervous system. It's called a fireworm for a reason. The pain from a touch is instantaneous and feels exactly like being burned by an open flame. This is followed by severe nausea, dizziness, and a burning sensation that can last for days. This defense mechanism is called aposematism, or warning coloration. The fireworm knows it's deadly, and with its bright colors, it gives a fair warning to every inhabitant of the reef. Eat me, and it will be your last meal. Biologically, they are slow and soft-bodied, just like their terrestrial cousins, and they survive in the ruthless reef exclusively thanks to their venom. If you think the bobbit worm is huge, you should know about the creatures that make it look like a dwarf in comparison. The longest animal on planet Earth isn't the blue whale or the giant dinosaurs of the past. It's a worm called the Nemertean, also known as the ribbon worm. While a blue whale reaches a maximum length of about 100 feet, scientists have recorded an individual ribbon worm, Lineus longissimus, estimated at an incredible 180 feet long. That's over half the length of a football field, made entirely of living, writhing flesh. Unlike muscular snakes, ribbon worms are very fragile, thin, and slippery. So how does such a disproportionate creature hunt? To find the next heroes of our story, we must descend to the very bottom of the ocean, to the hydrothermal vents. These are true underwater volcanoes, spewing black water superheated to hundreds of degrees, saturated with toxic chemicals. There are no fish here, no light, no bobbit worms. Instead, entire forests of giant tube worms, known as riftia, grow here, looking like 2-meter-long tubes of alien lipstick. The anatomy of these creatures is mind-blowing. They have no eyes, they have no mouth, they completely lack a stomach and intestines. They represent a biological dead end, a closed system. So how do they survive? The answer lies in an incredible symbiosis. Tube worms have fully delegated the process of nutrition and digestion to other organisms. Inside their bodies is a specialized organ called the trophosome, which is packed to the brim with billions of symbiotic bacteria. Since there is no sunlight for photosynthesis at this depth, these bacteria use hydrogen sulfide, deadly to humans, spewed from the volcanoes. Through chemosynthesis, they turn this toxic gas into sugar, feeding the worm itself. Essentially, the worm has set up a high-tech farm inside its own body, powered by toxic waste and volcanic heat. To find the next heroes of our story, we have to plunge all the way down to the very bottom of the ocean, straight to the hydrothermal vents. These are real underwater volcanoes, blasting out jets of black, superheated water that can reach over 750 degrees Fahrenheit, packed with toxic chemicals. Down here, there's no fish, no sunlight, no bobbit worms at all, but instead, entire forests of giant tube worms, Riftia pactilla, grow like 6-foot-tall alien tubes of bright red lipstick rising straight out of a sci-fi nightmare. The anatomy of these creatures is absolutely mind-blowing. They have no eyes, they have no mouth, they completely lack a stomach and intestines. They are basically a biological dead end, a completely closed system. So how on earth do they survive? The answer lies in an incredible symbiosis. These tube worms have outsourced the entire process of feeding and digestion to other organisms. Inside their bodies sits a specialized organ called the trophosome, packed to the brim with billions of symbiotic bacteria. Since there's zero sunlight at these depths for photosynthesis, these bacteria take deadly hydrogen sulfide gas spewing from the vents, toxic enough to kill a human, and through chemosynthesis, turn that poison into sugar, literally feeding the worm. In essence, the worm has built a high-tech farm inside its own body, powered by toxic waste and volcanic heat. Since Riftia tube worms don't have to waste any energy hunting for food, chewing, or digesting, they grow at an absolutely astonishing rate, nearly 3 feet per year. They are the fastest-growing marine invertebrates known to science. But evolution played a cruel trick on them. The ocean stripped away every function that makes an animal an animal. They have no brain, no instincts for self-preservation, no consciousness whatsoever, only a simple reflex of opening and closing their bright red breathing plume. They've essentially become living scaffolding, soft, multi-story apartment buildings for billions of bacteria that mine poison in the darkness. Finally, we come to the sea worms that occupy a niche similar to our familiar earthworms. They recycle dead organic matter, but they do it in a truly macabre fashion. When a massive whale dies and its carcass sinks to the ocean floor, a phenomenon known as a whale fall, thousands of scavengers descend for the feast. But our heroes, worms of the genus Osedax, known as zombie worms, don't eat the flesh at all. They patiently wait until nothing remains but the bare skeleton. Just like the tube worms, Osedax have no mouth and no stomach. Instead, they grow massive green root-like structures that physically bore deep into the hard whale bone. These roots secrete a powerful acid that dissolves calcium. Then symbiotic bacteria living inside the roots break down the fats and oils hidden deep within the skeleton. The zombie worms literally dissolve the bones of the dead whale and drink the nutrient-rich broth through their feet. But the most horrifying thing about them is their reproductive cycle. For a long time, biologists couldn't find any male Osedax worms. They scoured every bone until finally someone looked inside the females themselves. Turns out, the male zombie worm never grows up. It remains a microscopic, larval-like form of life forever. Its only purpose is to take up residence inside the tube of a giant female. One female can host anywhere from 50 to 100 of these dwarf males. They don't eat, they don't move, they never leave their living home. They simply exist to fertilize the eggs, and then they die. This has to be one of the strangest and most terrifying lifestyles on the entire planet. Their larvae drift by the thousands in the dark, cold ocean currents, hoping for that microscopic chance to settle on a fresh whalebone in the bottomless abyss. An astonishing process that would be completely impossible on land. Studying these deep-sea monsters, from the blind, predatory traps of the bobbit worm to the bone-dissolving zombie worms, you really start to appreciate our modest terrestrial biosphere. Yes, ordinary earthworms might seem slimy and a little gross to us, but come on, admit it. That's a whole lot better than running into venomous spines, dissolving slime, or 3-meter-long jaws lurking in the darkness.